The city lies in ash, and yet it lives. Hiroshima breathes, not as a memory, but as a wound that refuses closure. Into this trembling space enters the film Hiroshima Mon Amour, Alain René's luminous, disquieting meditation on remembering and forgetting. Two bodies meet, a French woman, a Japanese man. She arrives from a nation scarred by occupation and shame. He stands in a city irradiated by the unimaginable. Their affair is brief, fragile, yet burdened with the impossible, to understand the suffering of another, to hold catastrophe in the small vessel of human intimacy. René and Marguerite Duras do not offer narrative in the conventional sense here. Instead, they construct a space where time loops and splinters, where memory is not preservation, but a kind of sick fever. You saw nothing in Hiroshima, he says. I saw everything, she answers. Voices clash softly, not in anger, but an aching futility. Understanding is attempted, and it fails. Empathy reaches and fractures. Still they speak, because to be silent would be so much worse. It begins with bodies, not characters, not yet at least, just forms, anonymous and close, gripping each other tightly, desperately, skin pressed into skin, dust clinging like memory that refuses to fall away. Their embrace is tender, yet the ash that coats them evokes another kind of intimacy, the closeness between life and death. We do not enter the plot, but we do not enter through plot, but through texture, through the tactile residue of catastrophe. The lovers' bodies, first shimmering like polished stone, gradually reveal themselves as real, human, and vulnerable. The dust becomes sweat. The abstraction becomes presence. René announces before a single sentence has fully formed that Hiroshima Mon Amour exists in the liminal space between the symbolic and the painfully real. The world here will be both dream logic and documentary fact. Emotion and history will bleed together until distinguishing them feels impossible. Then come the voices, dialogue over images of hospitals, archives, and memorial displays. A refrain forms, insistently repeated, devastating in its simplicity.
Tu n'as rien vu à Hiroshima, rien.
J'ai tout vu, tout.
Their voices overlap the city's images, as the film itself is wrestling with the ethics of looking. Museums filled with relics of the bomb appear, charred metal photographs, artifacts arranged with reverence, and yet the words refuse to allow us the comfort of believing that seeing is knowing. The film insists on the gulf between witnessing and understanding. No single perspective can grasp the full truth of the situation. This contradiction is not resolved. It is placed like a weight into the viewer's palm and left there. The film's opening refuses catharsis. It refuses the illusion that atrocity can be neatly catalogued or safely processed through art. Instead, it frames representation of these events as a fragile, trembling act, necessary, but forever incomplete. Only after this ritual of confrontation do we fully arrive in the present tense. Two lovers in a hotel room, sweat replacing ash. Their bodies, moments ago abstracted, now carry history like a second skin. They are not symbols anymore, or rather they are symbols and they are human, trapped in the same impossible task as the film itself, to hold on to memory without dissolving under it. In Hiroshima Mon Amour, the lovers exist simultaneously as individuals and as representations of their nation's historical wounds. They're not introduced with traditional character depth or backstory. Instead, they stand at the intersection between personal suffering and collective trauma, embodying the scars left on France and Japan in the years following World War II. Ellie, the French woman, represents a country wrestling with the memory of occupation and the shame of collaboration. Her past is defined by a forbidden love affair with a German soldier during the war, an experience that culminated in her public humiliation and psychological distress. Her suffering is deeply personal, rooted not in global catastrophe, but in emotional devastation, ostracization, and private grief. Yet it parallels the moral ambiguity and internal division that France confronted in the post-war years. She carries trauma that is internal, hidden, and societally punished. Louis, the Japanese man, by contrast, embodies a trauma that is collective, monumental, and visible on the world stage. He comes from Hiroshima, a city synonymous with absolute and total destruction. His reserved nature and composure are not signs of detachment, but of endurance, of a society forced to rebuild after a near incomprehensible event. His experience reflects a national trauma that cannot remain private because it is etched into history, architecture, and memory. Their relationship is defined not by a typical romantic progression, but by the exchange of memory. They question, provoke, and challenge one another. Through their interaction, the film stages a dialogue between two different forms of historical suffering. A suffering that is intimate and emotionally raw, and a grief that is historical and culturally embedded. Renee refuses to frame one as greater than the other. Instead, the film suggests that trauma resists measurement. Personal anguish may feel as total and world-shattering to the sufferer as national tragedy does to a people. An individual trauma can violently alter a person, while a historical trauma can, without changing any one person, shift the personality of an entire culture. What unites the two characters is not equivalence, but recognition. Both have lived through devastation, a devastation that has shaped their identities and their capacity for human connection. Yet they do not necessarily heal each other. Their affair is brief, intense, and ultimately unresolved. The film's power lies in its refusal to heal. The lovers do not fix one another, nor do they pretend to fully understand each other's pain. Instead, they share a fleeting space in which their separate histories touch without merging. Their intimacy is less about romantic fulfillment and more about exposing the fragile foundation on which they rest. Through Ellie and Louis, Hiroshima Mon Amour asks whether human connection is possible in the shadow of history's greatest wounds, and whether memory is something that binds people together or isolates them within their own past. If there is a single conceptual core to Hiroshima Mon Amour, it is the tension between memory and forgetting. The film is fundamentally concerned with how individuals and societies hold on to trauma and the ways they inevitably, and sometimes out of necessity, let it slip away. Memory in this film is not a stable archive. It is fragile, fluid, and constantly threatened by the passage of time. It changes based on the context of the moment and the feelings of who is interacting with it. Forgetting, meanwhile, is not simple erasure. It is a psychological mechanism, an act of self-preservation, and at times, a betrayal. The dialogue between the lovers repeatedly returns to the idea that remembrance is never complete. When Louis tells Ellie, "You saw nothing in Hiroshima," he challenges the assumption that witnessing, even through documentary images, museum exhibits, or testimony, can ever equal experience. He's not dismissing her capacity for empathy so much as emphasizing the limits of representation. His statement is not a personal or judgmental one. It is an unfeeling fact that she cannot understand what happened to his city, no matter how much she tries. Ellie insists that she saw everything, invoking her encounters with the memorials and artifacts in Hiroshima, but the film frames her insistence as a struggle against the inevitable decay of memory. What she saw is already fading and slipping into abstraction. Her own past, however, refuses to fade. Ellie is haunted not by global catastrophe, but by the intensely personal memory of her first love and the punishment that followed. She has tried to bury this memory, yet it persists, erupting in her affair with Louis, in her confessions, and in the fragmented flashbacks that interrupt the narrative. Her trauma is defined not by a historical scale, but by an emotional immediacy. In contrast to Hiroshima, a tragedy the world strives to remember, her suffering is something society demanded she forget. The film thus places private memory and public history in contrast, what is unspeakable on the world stage versus what is forbidden in the intimate sphere. For Louis, forgetting is terrifying because it threatens the continuity of a wound that should not be softened. For Ali, forgetting is equally terrifying, but for the opposite reason. She fears losing the painful memory that defined her, because without it, she fears she will become nothing. In this way, forgetting is cast as both a danger and a relief, a violation of history, yet a necessity for life to continue. Memory binds and burdens, forgetting wounds and frees. This dynamic is reinforced formally. The film structure mirrors the movement of memory itself, loops, recurrences, emotional triggers, images returning with altered meaning. The past intrudes not in a neatly ordered sequences, but in flashes, subjective, intrusive, incomplete. Renée depicts memory not as a record, but as an open wound, one that flares unexpectedly and always demands attention. Ultimately, Hiroshima Mon Amour presents memory as a paradox. To remember fully is unbearable, to forget completely is impossible. The film suggests that human beings exist in the uneasy space between these two ends, forever pulled by the desire to honor what has happened and the need to survive it. Memory shapes identity, yet it threatens to consume it. Forgetting offers peace, but at the cost of truth and perhaps of the self. One of the most striking aspects of Hiroshima Mon Amour is its innovative use of narrative structure. Alain Resnais abandons chronological storytelling in favor of a fragmented, associative form that mirrors the workings of memory. Time is not linear, it loops, collapses, and interrupts the present, allowing past and present to exist at the same time on screen. The film does not simply recount events, it immerses the viewer in the psychological reality that the characters are trapped in. The editing alternates between the intimate hotel room, the city of Hiroshima, and flashbacks to Ellie's traumatic past in Nevers. These cuts are not motivated by conventional narrative causality, but by emotional causality. A gesture, a word, or an image triggers these recollections. By structuring the film this way, Resnais conveys how memory intrudes into the consciousness unbidden, and how trauma refuses to remain neatly compartmentalized and controlled. The cinematography, crafted in collaboration with cinematographer Satoshi Senda, reinforces the film's exploration of memory and trauma. The camera frequently lingers on intimate details, hands brushing against each other, ash clinging to skin, the texture of a wall or floor, inviting the viewer to feel the tactile reality of the characters' experiences, contrasted with the fluid unreality of their memory. Long takes in the hotel room create a sense of immediacy and confinement, while wide shots of Hiroshima juxtapose personal ruin with the scale of historical ruin. The use of deep focus and careful framing allows past and present to coexist within the same visual plane. A character may occupy the foreground while an image of the past lingers subtly in the background, visually manifesting memory's intrusion into their lives. The film is stunning in its melancholy. It is filled with beautiful images, but they are, all of them, cold and distant. The sound further reinforces this fractured state in time. The film frequently overlays voices, off-screen dialogue, and environmental noise, creating a layered audio landscape that captures the characters' discordant mental states. The music is sparse, often absent, allowing for natural sounds to punctuate emotional beats and maintain a sense of realism. The film's refusal of linear structure is central to its thematic structure. By disrupting chronological order, Resnais refuses to allow viewers the comfort of a narrative closure. Instead, the audience experiences memory as the characters do, partial, disruptive, and extremely emotionally charged. The structure itself becomes a form of empathy, forcing viewers to inhabit the fractured psychological space of survivors. In abandoning conventional narrative logic, Hiroshima Mon Amour also anticipates later developments in art cinema and the French New Wave. It demonstrates that form can carry meaning as powerfully as content. Here, the editing, visual composition, sound design are not just aesthetic choices, they are integral to the film's meditation on its themes. A central strength of Hiroshima Mon Amour lies in its exploration of two interconnected but distinct forms of trauma, the personal and the historical. René and Duras juxtapose Ellie's intimate past with the collective devastation of Hiroshima, creating a layered meditation on how suffering operates at different scales and how it shapes identity, memory, and emotional experiences. Hiroshima represents the monumental. Visibly catastrophic, the city is shown through documentary-like imagery, including even documentary imagery. These include hospital wards, memorials, ruins, and streets where life continues amidst the aftermath. René often lingers on these spaces, allowing the camera to observe not only the physical devastation, but also the humans that live in it. Children play near rubble, workers repair buildings, and survivors move through their daily routines, suggesting that life continues even in the shadow of such profound destruction. These sequences emphasize that the trauma of Hiroshima is not merely a historical event confined to textbooks or archives. It is ongoing, embedded in the lives of the survivors and of the urban landscape itself. The city exists as both a living reminder of past violence and a setting in which human resilience unfolds. Luynes embodies this duality. He carries the weight of the city's collective memory while also navigating his own personal struggles in the aftermath of the bomb. Through his interactions, gestures, and silences, he conveys the enduring impact of the disaster on an individual. His presence in the film is inseparable from the city itself. He is both shaped by it and a witness to it. He is not the foreigner in this story. The ruins, memorials, and everyday life of Hiroshima are not merely background. They interact with him, reflecting his internalized grief, his memories of loss, and his attempts to reconcile the scale of historical trauma with demands of living day to day. In this way, Hiroshima is rendered as a living, breathing entity, its destruction continually affecting the present, shaping relationships, and haunting the spaces in which human life continues to operate. The city becomes a character in its own right, embodying the tension between memory and forgetting. Nevers, by contrast, represents an intensely personal trauma, and only exists in memory. Ellie recalls her wartime love with a German soldier, an experience that ended in incredible humiliation, confinement, and emotional trauma. Unlike Hiroshima, this trauma is private and largely invisible to the outside world. Yet within the narrative, it carries weight equal to that of the atomic disaster. Through her memories, the film suggests that personal trauma, although intimate and socially overlooked, can be as psychologically consuming as events that affect entire nations. By interweaving these two catastrophes, Hiroshima Mon Amour refuses to establish a hierarchy of suffering. The film highlights the parallels between personal and collective trauma, showing that both leave deep and emotional scars, shape the capacity for human connection, and challenge the possibility for full understanding. The contrast between Ellie and Luynes emphasizes the subjective nature of experience. For her, private memories are vivid and consuming. For him, the consequences of Hiroshima are ever present, shaping his perception of the world and his interactions with others. Neither character can fully inhabit the other's pain, yet their brief connection demonstrates how different forms of trauma operate against one another. They are in the end both defined by their trauma. At the end of the film, they both name themselves after their respective locations. This duality also reinforces the film's meditation on memory. Personal and collective catastrophes are both meditated by recollection, narrative, and the act of witnessing. The editing, cinematography, and dialogue continually move between eras and Hiroshima, illustrating how memory intrudes into the present, how past and present coexist, and how trauma can never be neatly tied up. The two forms of catastrophe are interdependent rather than separate, demonstrating that understanding whether of oneself, another person, or the history of a country is always partial, provincial, and can change on a dime. Through this juxtaposition of personal and historical trauma, the film explores the universal human struggle to reconcile contradictory parts of their nature and of the world they see around them. It shows that both forms of suffering shape identity, influence perception, and complicate the possibility of connection. The dual catastrophes provide the emotional and psychological center of the film, emphasizing that memory is never singular, and that trauma, whether personal or collective, reverberates far beyond its initial context. The performances in Hiroshima Mon Amour are central to what the film is doing. Emmanuelle Riva, portraying Ellie, delivers a performance that is vulnerable and unflinching. Her presence on screen communicates both the intensity of her personal grief and also the level to which she has buried it. Riva's subtle gestures, facial expression, and voice convey a spectrum of emotions, from longing and desire to shame and introspection. Every line she delivers carries weight, reflecting the tension between personal experience and her own present nature. Every line she delivers carries weight. Her performance captures the inner conflict of a woman haunted by the past while attempting to ignore it in the present. Eiji Okada, in the role of Louis, complements Riva with a performance marked by quiet strength and emotional depth. He is the more reserved of the two characters and often serves as a mirror for Ali. He embodies a character shaped by collective trauma, representing both the city of Hiroshima and the endurance of its survivors. Okada communicates grief and patience and the difficulty of articulating pain without the proper words for it, often relying on subtle expression and controlled movement. His calm demeanor contrasts with Ellie's emotional volatility, yet it is never emotionally distant. This contrast highlights the differences in their experiences while also demonstrating the fragile empathy that allows them to connect, despite their inability to understand one another. The emotional tone of the film is shaped by the interplay of these performances. Intimacy and desire are not played for sensuality alone, but as mechanisms for exploring the film's themes. Moments of tenderness are intertwined with reflection and confession, making the love story inseparable from the weight of history and personal trauma. The actors' performances bring a profound humanity to the film, emphasizing that emotional connection is possible even in the shadow of devastation. The emotional tone is further reinforced by René's direction and Duras' screenplay. Scenes unfold slowly, allowing the audience to inhabit the emotional space between the characters. Pauses, silences, and lingering glances create a weird rhythm that mirrors the intrusion of memory. The tension between intimacy and volatility is constant, reminding viewers that both of these characters could change at any moment. Together, the performances and emotional tone elevate Hiroshima Mon Amour beyond a conventional romance or historical drama. The actors' portrayals, combined with the film's structure, cinematography, sound design, and all other aspects, create a work that is intensely human, emotionally complex, and intellectually challenging. The audience is invited to feel the weight of the past along with the characters, experiencing both the tenderness of human connection and the persistent ache of memory, and are forced to leave the film knowing that they will not be able to understand either.